This is organized by a coalition of partners. It's the League of Women Voters, Big Vote, Upvote Virginia. We've got Veterans for All from Mike Contrell. So we've got Common Cause Virginia. We've got Upvote Virginia. So anyway, we're here to support good governance and having our voices heard more loudly in our democracy. And we're pretty excited. We'll be discussing the bills later. But we're getting started because we have two legislators, and Heidi is the person facilitating, but we want to get started since Marcus Simon and Dan Helmer are here. Both of them are champions of good governance bills. So Marcus, do you want to come up and just talk about your bills?
Sure. Well, thank you guys for coming, and thank you all for taking up the cause. Campaign finance reform has proven to be a little bit of a challenging topic. We're going to get down to the nitty-gritty. But I think things are looking up for my perennial bill that would ban the conversion of campaign funds to personal use in Virginia. We reported out unanimously now and then on to appropriations. The current hurdle is going to be the Department of Elections. So the way we did personal use, I think that's caused it to get some momentum here is we're essentially importing all of the federal regulations, right? So federal campaign law has always prohibited converting funds to personal use. And every year, I know Sarah's probably heard these questions, like the governing committees and stuff. You get folks that say, well, what about this, or what about that, and what are so forth. And it turns out the Federal Elections Commission has a huge database of frequently asked questions and advisory opinions. These are not original questions. Everybody's had these questions and thought about these issues before. So one of the things that the bill does is it imports all of the federal election guidance on personal use into the Virginia Code. And so the elect is going to take all that in and look at it, and also have the ability to issue advisory opinions. So again, if you're worried about whether an expenditure is going to be allowed or not, we're not setting a trap for anybody. You simply go ask, and they will tell you, yes, you can do that, no, you can't. We already have that essentially with our ethics reform and what gifts you can accept, and whether you can take tickets, and who can go with you, and so forth. So the issue, of course, is that now Alexa says, well, we need a bunch of new people and more money to administer all these things, all these safeguards you've built in. So it's going up to appropriations. I don't think the ask is that huge of an ask. I think it's something that is supportable. I have had conversations with leaders from both caucuses offline who, again, raised against some of these particular specific concerns about the breadth of the bill and what the exceptions will be and whether certain past practices will still be permitted. And I've given them, pointed them to the advisory opinions, and I think everybody's getting comfortable with where we want to be. So, cautiously optimistic. I mean, I am a little bit like Lucy in the football with this particular bill. I look like Charlie Brown. I'm like halfway through my mad dash and hoping that nobody lifts it up and has me fall flat on my back again. Again, I think that things are looking good for that. It seems like a common sense measure. Again, all but like 2 other states have already figured out how to do it, how to administer, how to make it work. So I'm looking forward to seeing that pass, and looking forward to some of the other campaign finance reforms that we've got going on.
And public financing of elections, you got to.
And we've got a bill in that may not make it over the finish line this year, right? Again, having learned the lessons, but I've introduced. So I do have a public financing small donor bill. That's a sort of a matching program. It'll be funded by a tax checkoff on your tax returns and try and start to build up a public financing option. I think we've all seen just tremendous amounts of money that it takes to run a campaign these days, and the amount of money you have to raise. And I think that that folks are hungry for a better way, a different option, an option that takes out some of the big, huge corporate influences and the mega donor influences, and now allows people to leverage small donors and more grassroots type of donations. So yeah, we'll have that as well. All right, I'll hand it off to Dan. All right. It's a shame no more. How are you? Oh, no. Someone's losing a phone.
Delegate Dan Helmer, thank you all for being out here in support of democracy. When we talk about campaign finance reform, that's a lot of words. At the end of the day, this is about defending our democracy all over the country, all over our Commonwealth. We see that our democracy is under attack. House Bill 276 is a way for us to stand up and defend our democracy by ensuring that those who are putting forward advocacy on behalf of elections are required to disclose their participation. As a way to tackle the scourge of dark money that has been invading our elections, that is undermining faith in our democracy, that is causing us to question who is advocating for or against certain causes or on behalf of certain candidates. What it does is say that if you are going to do an independent expenditure in a campaign or related to a referendum, we need to know where the money comes from. It has become too easy in Virginia for folks to hide behind our campaign disclosure laws, to advocate on behalf of something, to put out lies or falsehoods, and for nobody to be accountable for that. And so what this bill does is make a very simple statement that we believe that in Virginia, that if you are spending money on behalf of advocacy related to an election, we have a right as Virginians to know who's doing it. So we're going to push really hard to get that done. I'm really excited to have all of you here standing up with us to defend democracy, and we're going to work really hard. So thank you.
And just to make mention of Jennifer Boyceville, her bill is, I think, going to be heard in the Senate this afternoon. And last year, we were so excited that it passed 15-0, that we broke decorum and everybody started clapping and you were going like that. So we were very proud of that, and we hope the same thing happens today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Senator Boysko. I represent the 38th Senate District. This is my 9th year in the General Assembly and have been fighting for these issues for a long time. This year I will be bringing SB 377 before the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee. This is an important bill that would restrict personal use of campaign funds that I believe Delegate Marcus Simon is carrying the cognate. Nearly every state in the United States, as well as federal government, already bans the use of campaign funds for personal use. According to the Pew Research Center of polling, trust in elected officials is at an all-time low. We need to assure our constituents that elected officials who are running for office are there to serve them, not for their private benefit. We don't have to think very far about abuses, because if anybody knows the name George Santos, front and center, right? So let's think about this. He was just expelled from Congress. I was actually on Capitol Hill the day that happened. He was found that he had substantial evidence that he committed federal crimes. The report detailed how Mr. Santos diverted tens of thousands of dollars of campaign money towards his personal expenses, including luxury goods, Atlantic City casinos, rent payments, and a website that was primarily known for explicit sexual conduct. He spent money on spa days and vacations, luxury retail purchases, and other things. But I want you all to be aware that if he had been a legislator here in the General Assembly, the vast majority of the things that he spent his money on would have been perfectly legal. Crazy, right? I mean, it's horrific. So, while our donors, and I was the fundraising chair for the Senate Democratic Caucus this year, I know I've talked to thousands of people who are giving their money, expecting that we are going to use that money towards our own election campaigns or to help other people. But there's no requirement. We can keep the money, we can pocket it, we can just give it to ourselves. I can take the entire group of you on a vacation if I wanted to, and it would be perfectly legal as long as I reported it. And so my bill, it says that contributions accepted by candidates may be used for the following purposes: for expenditures in connection with a candidate's campaign, for ordinary and necessary expenses incurred in connection with the duties of the individual as an office holder, for dependent care. We think, there are a lot of people who are entering the political foray these days who might be the primary caregiver for their child or even for their parents. That would be an acceptable expense. And for any other lawful purpose that is in the realm of actually either running your own campaign or doing your job as an elected official. These are common sense, no-brainers. I can't believe that we still can't get this done in Virginia, but knowing that we have a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, I look forward to getting this onto the governor's desk and daring the governor to sign the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, okay.
Wonderful, well,
With the questions, or we?
yeah, absolutely. Anybody have questions for the legislators? Are we taking any more time? Yeah.
Sarah Rankin, community, excuse me, I wondered if anybody, this was, I think, the most expensive election cycle, if not gonna be in Virginia history. Can anybody speak to whether you support caps on contributions and what the impact of that flood of money was in your view?
Yeah, I had numerous conversations with our attorneys here in the General Assembly about how we would draft such, and what we found, what he determined, and I've been working with him, was that it would be difficult, it would be like squeezing a balloon. So we put a limit on one form, someone else, either your caucus or someone else would be able to spend. It would be very, very difficult to actually limit it. What I think is important is that we do have a requirement to record and report every expenditure that you have, and then the voters can make a decision about what, who they want to get behind. We spend way too much money on campaigns, and we know that money, I've been spent 3 to 1 in more than one election of mine. Money should not be buying elections, and I do agree with you, with many people, that we need to find some common sense solutions.
Maybe if I could just a second, sorry.
Yeah. So I think, just to add to that, I do support contribution limits, and I think one of the most important things we need if we're gonna put those in place is disclosure, right? So that's why this disclosure bill is so important, because if you put contribution limits in place, which we should do, and we should also ban publicly regulated utilities from contributing to the campaigns. I think it's really important that we put those limits in place, because otherwise you just continue to see the ballooning escalation of campaign costs over time. But in order to do that effectively, make sure that we essentially, as Senator Boyce was saying, squeeze that balloon, that we know where the money's going. We need to have disclosure in place. And today, we don't have disclosure in place. So we put limits in place, but when we put limits in place, it's just going to flow into dark money, which is what's happened federally. So that's why it's so important that we pass HB 276, which would say, hey, even as we put limits in place, we're going to know where the expenditures are taking place and who's not.
If I just make an interjection before you leave, because there will be a bill that is introduced by David Bulova, which is a great bill, and it was done in consultation with Dominion and Clean Virginia, recognizing this was the most expensive election in Virginia history. It was second only to Illinois. Per capita cost was $22, 4 times California and Texas. He did a great bill in discussing with the major donors. We do hope it gets a discussion, and we hope that senior leadership passes it. But you're right, this has to be done in conjunction with disclosure, and public financing sort of evens out that triangle of good governance and campaign finance. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Senator Superminer, would you like to introduce your bill?
Yeah, hey, first of all, I agree with everything I just said. I'm actually here to talk about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting, yeah. So, generally we've been trying to make this push. I think one of the problems with ranked choice voting is that the people in this building were not voted in based on ranked choice voting. The only person
They know better.
benefited from ranked choice voting was the governor. He came in a ranked choice voting primary, and so it's hard to make changes, wholesale changes, just like with campaign finance. A lot of people are here because they got the big bucks and like the system. They don't like to make change to a system that works for them, right? But it's important that we make change, and so I've got SB 270. It's for the presidential election, but I think by getting the presidential election addressed, we can address other parts, and it gives the parties the option to implement ranked choice voting for presidential elections. We don't have time, obviously, this year, but in 2028, if you think about a presidential election, I know in 2020, I don't want to say who I voted for, but they may or may not have dropped out by the time the Virginia primary happened. And so, you know, I'm happy with what we got, but at the same time, a lot of times, you know, if you can rank your choices and then someone drops out that you really like, it's okay, because, you know, we know who your other choices are. And so that's what this bill is for. I think presidential is the easiest place where we can start. And we're just giving the parties the option. If they decide they don't want to do it that way, or they don't need it for that cycle, then let's make it that. But I'd like to see overall, I hear we have some crowded primaries this year at the congressional level. And so it'd be really nice if instead of 20% winning the election, we had ranked choice voting. And so, you know, everyone, you know, maybe there's a candidate who's everyone's number 2 choice, and that might be a good thing if they get elected, right? And so I just think that, you know, these types of changes promote democracy, they promote the views of the citizens and the preferences of the citizens, and will be good for us long term. And we're not breaking any ground. States like California already do this, and they end up with candidates that everyone likes, not just candidates who get a plurality of many candidates. So I'm happy to take questions, but I'm glad to be here. And on campaign finance, the discussion sounded really good at the end. And Marcus Simon was here, that's a good sign too. He's great on this issue, and very supportive of all that he's doing. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Questions for the senator?
Yes.
I know on the side of the Senate, at least, there's also Senate Bill 420A, which would expand the local options for localities. What is your understanding on how that's going through the process on the Senate side, at least?
We had a pilot program, right, for one locality?
Arlington,
Yeah.
This would just expand it.
I thought it went really well, and so,
Right.
you know, I would love to expand it. I think, you know, the folks in Arlington had a great experience with it. It wasn't, you know, it's not overwhelming for people that get it, right? And once they do it once, then they'll do it forever. So yeah, I'm very supportive, and if we're not signed on to the bill, make sure to sign on, and hopefully it gets through that committee too, so we can have a discussion about it, and hopefully put it on the governor's desk. Which, I don't know what happens when you put things on the governor's desk. We'll always put it on his desk and see what happens.
All right.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So we're gonna go rewind all the way to the back here. I apologize, I was a minute late, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but thank you all for being here. Today is our 2nd annual Democracy Day. We have people from all over the state. We had 150 people sign up to come out and represent democracy issues. They are not the sexiest issues, but they are the systemic and infrastructural reforms that we believe are necessary to make sure that our state government is more representative of real Virginians and more reflective of those real Virginians. So even though we have a breadth of issues that we're talking about today that may seem like they are or are not related, we believe that they all achieve the same goal, which is making a more representative government. So very grateful for everybody who's come out today. We believe that this is showing the General Assembly, hopefully showing the General Assembly that we mean business on these issues. There are groups watching, there are people watching, and we do want to see action because we unfortunately have seen many, many years of inaction on these issues, like the Senator just mentioned, because I think for a body that got here under these rules, it can sometimes be difficult to turn around and change them. With that, I want to quickly introduce a bunch of our co-sponsors. We have 10 co-sponsors of Democracy Day this year. That includes Big Money Out Virginia, Upvote Virginia, Represent Us, Clean Virginia, the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Veterans for All Voters, Freedom Virginia, and the Impact Project. So we've got quite a slate of heavy hitters. Again, I'm just going to invite everybody up very briefly to talk about their org and why they're here and think these issues are important. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy Morgan with Big Money Out Virginia.
So Heidi, could you present our bills? Because we have the red team and we've got a 9:30 meeting with Senator Rouse, who is really important because he's had to put me in.
Yeah, so Nancy's going to head out because we are meeting with legislators. But yes, there are a couple of issues that I will very briefly talk about. We do support a ban on the personal use of campaign funds. That is, as has been really an issue that has died for, I think, the last decade here in Virginia. We would like to see that passed. We also support campaign contribution limits, and just increased disclosure in the public financing bill. So those are all the slate for Big Money Out Virginia. I will turn it over to Liz from Upvote Virginia to talk about ranked choice voting.
Good morning. I'm Liz White. I am the Executive Director of Upvote Virginia. You got to hear a really great introduction to ranked choice voting from Senator Subramaniam. As he mentioned, he is carrying SB 270, which gives the party the option to use ranked choice voting for presidential primaries. And the other bill in the Senate, which was mentioned, is SB 428, that is Senator Van Valkenburg's bill, and it is identical to Patrick Hope's bill in the House, which is HB 841. They would just expand the existing law. Currently, Virginia localities are allowed to use ranked choice voting for their city council or county board of supervisors elections. This bill would just expand that to allow localities to use ranked choice voting for any local office. And then the last bill is Delegate Josh Cole. It is HB 658. And it is similar to Senator Subramaniam's, except that it gives the parties the option to use ranked choice voting in any primary, from legislative to statewide to presidential. Ranked choice voting is a tool. It is something that allows parties to identify strong, unifying, universally appealing candidates. It allows voters to more thoroughly express our preference. It disincentivizes negative campaigning. It makes our campaigns better and more substantive. And it elects the kinds of people who are really looking to solve our problems and not just represent a tiny fraction of their electorate. So thank you everybody for being here. I'm really excited to bring attention to these issues.
Thanks, Liz. Now we will bring up Bo from Represent Us.
Thank you, and thank you all, Heidi and Liz and everyone who's put this together. Represent Us is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to support the work of groups like Big Money Out Virginia and Upvote Virginia and others who are working to encourage legislators to represent us and not big money donors. And so that's why we're here today, to help support their efforts and applaud the work that they have done to date, especially getting off to the great start last night with the defeat of the ban bill on RCD. So starting off in a good direction, and looking forward to more. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Dan Holmes from Clean Virginia.
Hi everyone, I feel like now we should probably just pull up a table and have a nice little conversation, but again, won't take long. Dan Holmes, Clean Virginia, I'm Legislative Director here in the GA, so this is the busy time of year, obviously. Clean Virginia is a 501c4. We formed to fight utility corruption, basically. We were seeing years after year large donations made by our major utilities, and that resulted in what I would say is probably one of the larger thefts in the Commonwealth. Over $2 billion transferred from ratepayers to the utility shareholders. So obviously, we've got a very dedicated funder who's behind our organization who decided to come in and try to combat that money. Recognizing that Clean Virginia is a part of this campaign, the increasing amount of money that's being spent on campaigns, we are absolutely in favor of bringing that money back down to a reasonable level. We do believe in campaign caps. We do support many of the measures that are being discussed here today. I think that we are home to the oldest elected legislative body in America, and sometimes our laws reflect what I would expect to be in place 400 years ago. So hopefully we can modernize our election process, our campaign finance process, and bring us into an area where a new day in the Commonwealth, where we actually have a little bit greater faith and trust, not just in the politicians that we elect, but in the process itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I think we lost the rest of our co-sponsors to legislator meetings. Democracy Day attendees will be meeting with legislators today, and then attending committee hearings this afternoon to testify hopefully on the bills that we hope to see passed in the legislature this year. So thank you all for coming, really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can always check out our website, vademocracyday.com, or reach out to any of us personally, and any of the co-sponsors I'm sure would be happy to